What's up, guys? This is We Don't Know Yet, a podcast where you learn something new every single day. And today we're going to be talking or following up on something that we were talking about in the last episode of our podcast. I think Brian has the clip, so I'm going to let him go ahead and play it.
As was. And play.
And it's like the idea of the whole like white guilt when you said it's appropriate. What do you mean by it's appropriate? I get the understanding of being empathetic and understanding where you are and where you stand and the reasons why that is. But when you say it's appropriate, what do you mean?
Okay, and from that clip, we were talking about the context of white guilt because a few things happened last week and actually this week too that made me just kind of shrug my shoulders, and I was just like, this is a little bit ridiculous. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about it real quick. There's a voice actress from this show called Bigmouth, and Bigmouth is this funny kind of it's a raunchy adult show about teenagers going through puberty and all their changes, right? I'm going through changes. You know that? Yeah, I love that. All right, so, but there's this voice actor of this character, and the character she's half Jewish, so she has a white mother, I believe, and a black father. But she is black, right? And the voice actor, or the voice actress is she's not black at all. She is Jewish though, right? So because of everything that's been going on, she comes forward and says, because I don't have the black experience, I feel uncomfortable voicing this character, and I'm going to give up my job. And hopefully they can find someone who is black to voice this character. I saw this other guy in Canada. He's this host of like a very like popular series on TV, and his was, I think, even a little bit more next level because it's not like he was voicing anyone. It was just his personality. But what he said was he said, I feel like there's a lack of minority involvement or like voices in terms of what I do. So I'm going to step down from my current job, and I want us to find a minority, to fill my role. Specifically a minority. He does not want another white person to fill his role. So he's saying, we're going to find a minority to fill this role.
He didn't say black person, he said minority.
It's Canada, so I think he was probably thinking black person, but I think he meant minority.
He said minority just as
a whole. He wants to find a minority individual to take his job. And when I heard that one especially, I was just like, yo, like, okay. Like, this is a situation where in his specific situation, I'm just like, you got to find the best person for the job. I understand it's necessary and it's good to have a diverse workplace, but at the same time, if you're really good at what you do, if you're a white person versus a black person or whatever versus another person, the better person should be able to do that job. And I just feel like, especially someone going in and taking his job in front of people who he has an audience, and now someone else is going to be speaking to his audience, but they're going to be a minority. I feel like they're already going to be in such a bad place because the audience is like, we loved him, and now we're supposed to love you because you're Indian or black or whatever. I feel like he already put them in a bad position because now they're just like, I hate using this reference, but in that specific case, that is like the definition of a token. Like, he specifically said, we want someone that's a minority. Like, they just
that's the only checkbox you have to.
And of course, they're going to make sure they're
filled.
And of course, they're going to make sure they're qualified. But in essence, it's like, we're not going to have a white person fill this job, even if they're great.
So you don't have an issue with you're concurring and in alignment with what they're saying. Like, we do need more black voices. We need more black folk in these roles. But I think, and let me just jump right in. I think we're in the same boat in that we do need black folks who are filled with genius, filled with strength, filled with resilience to dive in and take over these markets, take over these industries, and put our stamp on spaces that otherwise weren't open to us before.
Mm-hmm.
But you're saying, and I do agree, the approach that folks are taking, that's not helpful for whomever is coming in, because it says, it implies like maybe their heart is in the right place. Like, yeah, we want to get more Black folks in this office. But what it implies is that we're just handing out jobs. If you're Black and there's this white guilt that is present today, because I feel bad, I'm just going to kind of give a position or a role to someone who otherwise wouldn't be qualified for this position. And that, it's like it's like a backwards compliment, right? It's like
backhanded
backhanded,
compliment.
thank you. Backhanded compliment. It's like, you look good today, but it implies I don't look good any other type of day. So what I will concur is that the approach is off. And I think that we're living in a world of appeasement. We're living in this world where we're trying to appease to Black folks. But your question last time was, is white guilt appropriate right now? And I think it is. I think that, and I'll speak about myself, in my 27 years of life, I have not once seen a climate in which, like, at a whole, like, white folks are very, I'm not going to say understanding is not the right word, but it are like open to, and maybe like have an eye on what, like a moral lens on what's happening in the Black community. And it's even in 20%, 10%, 15%, whatever, empathetic to that cause.
Mm-hmm.
Like in the past, it would have been like, oh, like Rodney King got beat up on.
Why was he getting beat up? What did he do? Huh? Like there's something he did.
There's something he did to deserve that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so nobody really cared. LA is on fire, right? During the riots. But there wasn't any type of moral like response to that. Or you can go down and down the lines, starting with slavery. Like there's still discussions today about reparations, and folks are vehemently opposed to that. So this is the first time in my adult life, in my life as a whole, where white folks are actually trying to jump on board with trying to address inequity in this country. But I think folks are trying to figure out the best way in doing it.
Mm-hmm. And I think that the way that it's going in these situations is just kind of, it's too much. Especially, it just seems like people are trying to get media clout for this right now.
Mm.
Like
they don't really care. They just want to be like, oh, we did this, and Black people love us.
Especially Hollywood, because Hollywood's always behind very liberal, like very, very left causes, very liberal causes. Hollywood's always behind that. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but a lot of times they always try to take it to the next level to get attention, right? So I'm going to give up my job so I can, give some Black people more opportunity, etc. I just think that it's not, it's just corny, bro. Like it's really corny.
You know what it makes me feel like?
What?
You remember those late night commercials, like when you're watching, I don't know, Toonami or Adult Swim, and then there's the world, like, I don't know, UNICEF, like World Vision, like commercials will pop up and it says, these are all the children that live in Congo, and these are their straits, and this is the life that they live. But you can save them for 60 cents.
There's always a kid with a fly.
Right?
There's always a kid with a fly buzzing around his face.
On his eye. And for those who are listening, this is not us trying to make light of what's happening in emerging markets. Y'all know that we're from Africa. There's a lot of wealth in Africa. There's a lot of poverty and a lot of suffering in Africa. As in, there's a lot of wealth in America. There's a lot of suffering in America. So you don't see us putting commercials up of our, folks who are making $1 a day or $20 a week. You don't see them putting commercials up and asking for people in Europe to like cover their costs. So it's just like, I don't know. It just makes it feel as though you're lesser than, or you're in a different like space than us. And I have to give you something, Brian, in order for you to be at the same level that I'm at. You know what I'm saying? So it robs me of the opportunity to self-determination and align and correct my own, or design my own route in life. But then it also like, I don't know, it has like psychological effects too. It's like, it's always going to be this like ladder, and I'm never going to be at the same level as someone else, from a different creed or from a different background. Or maybe I'm just rambling. What do you think?
Well, what do you mean by that exactly? What do you like? Do you personally feel that you're never going to be on the same level, or that you think that you're never going to be perceived as being on the same level?
I like that. I think that I'm putting myself in the space of the actor who's taking on, or actress, whoever takes on this role on Bigmouth.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say, Brian, we think you're the best person for this role. You've done X, Y, and Z. Your credentials are high, and we think that you can bring the Black experience to this character as a plus. I'm gonna walk in, I'm gonna be like, yeah, I did that. I deserve to be here, or maybe I don't deserve to be here.
There's always going to be an asterisk in your head.
Maybe maybe I'm not the one, and it just heightens my imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a pool of 200 people and I'm the best person for the job and I'm pulled up, it's like, yeah, I'm walking it on day one and I deserve to be here, and we're gonna rock, we're gonna make moves. But to be it's kind of that second best, you know, to get that what's the word when you're in a competition, honorable mention.
Mm-hmm.
It's yeah, you're always gonna have that asterisk.
Yeah. That's why I think it's like a lot of these specific situations where someone, I feel like it's better to, instead of stepping down from a position of potential power, if you're someone who has that power, so if you are this voice actor, maybe then talk about like, first off, in the voice acting community, let me just say this, there are a wealth of like voices. There are white people, there are Black people that voice white characters. Like I told you, the guy, his name's like Phil Lamar. I just looked him up. He voiced a bunch of characters: Samurai Jack, Static Shock, Green Lantern, Aquaman, white Aquaman, by the way. Like he voiced quite a few white characters too. There's this other guy, his name is, what's his name? Let's see. Yeah, Cree Summer. He voiced the Joker. He also did voice a bunch of Black characters, but he's also voiced a few white characters. I told you, James Earl Jones voiced Darth Vader, and Darth Vader is white. Like,
we think he's white. Have you ever seen Darth Vader's face?
No.
He's Anakin Skywalker, but yes.
You see his face when he at the last third movie, after he pulls off his mask. When Luke Skywalker pulls off his mask, you see it's a white man underneath. So yeah, we know that Darth Vader is white.
Like, I was trying to say it from like a historical lens. Didn't like episode 3?
Luke, I am your father.
Episode
it's
4
my father
came
Black?
out first. But no. Let's go back to the 70s. Episode 4.
You're my Black daddy?
Shocker. That's the twist. Star Wars. The alternative version. No, but like in the 70s, they dropped episode 4. He's Darth Vader. He's blowing everything up. And then it's not until episode 6 that he actually is like unveiled, right? So technically, we don't know he's white until like three movies later.
Bro, if I was a little Black boy watching Star Wars when the episode 4 came out, I would not even assume that Darth Vader is Black, because like every character in this universe, other than Lando, right? Lando Calrissian is white. So I'd be like, Darth Vader's probably white too. And he was.
That's
right. So, that would have been a great twist, though, if you pulled off this mask and you see James Earl Jones.
What's up? What y'all think was gonna happen? I would have been like Star Wars would have went down in history if they did that, bro. I would have lost it.
Oh,
but dude, I love that. But I don't even remember what we were talking about.
I was saying, like, in the voice acting community, like, you know, I'm not some expert, but there are a lot of like black actors who are literally at the top, at the highest levels of that type of work, right?
True.
So, you know, I mean, I get it. You don't want to voice a black character, but there are black people that are voicing white characters. I do think, though, that okay, did you even know that Cleveland from Family Guy was voiced by a white guy?
That's actually pretty disrespectful.
See, so when I saw that, I was like,
I'm actually pretty bad.
When I saw that,
no. Like, I'm like, I don't know if I could listen to Cleveland.
You can't see him, and then here it's a white guy. Like, they're like, that's something that I support. I'm like, okay, you know what? I can understand that.
I don't think. All right,
he has a family too.
Yeah, I don't think that I have a problem with necessarily with black actors voicing white characters and vice versa, as long as it's not like these stereotypical type of roles or things or roles that like reinforce stereotypes. So like the Cleveland show, it's funny as heck. It's a spin-off of Family Guy, but some of the stuff in the show is kind of like it's kind of like borderline, like I can't really rock with that. Then to know that there's a white actor behind his voice makes me not want to watch it at all, right?
Yeah,
that already kind of sits a little bit off of me. But I think the core of the matter or the crux of the conversation is that anybody can play any role, but it's, you know, being very careful on what they play and not overlooking really great black actors and actresses for roles and deferring for someone who's white instead. Because you were saying, I forget her name, but the actress, what's her name from Bigmouth?
I don't know her name.
Okay.
I just know she's half Jewish. She's half Jewish, and the character is half Jewish, right? But the character is also half black.
The character is black. Yeah.
Character is black.
If you're even a little bit black, you're black, right? So it's like, the thing is that if in selecting her, if she was the best person for the role, cool. But if there's a slew of actresses that could have been better or just as good and they were black and they chose her instead, that's where you have an issue. So now people are trying to respond, I think, you know, because there's so many different layers to it, but they're just at the surface level of let's just give black folks opportunities because they can't get it themselves. That implication is harming. But remember, I brought up when Netflix started doing the categories. So like right when the protests were starting and everybody was trying to jump on the bandwagon, they did the Black Lives Matter category. And you saw the black banner across at the top of the site or at the top of the platform saying, we stand with black folks, we stand in solidarity. You know, they started having all these bins of like strong black lead and this, that, and the third. And I'm like, what does that have to do with anything? I'm just here just trying to watch 30 minutes of film and go to sleep. Like, I feel like that like level of, you could say appeasement or pacification, whatever. Like that was just like, it was just wordplay. You know what I'm saying? Just to be like, oh, we stand with black people. But then today I saw with Netflix, they done two really cool things. One, they confirmed and recommended that they're going to put up $100 million towards black-owned banks, right? So they're putting their money where their mouth is. They're not just doing these really, you know, these solidarity posts, but actually putting money towards black banks, black initiatives. I think they're doing a few different initiatives internally as well. They just hired, do you know Bozama St. John?
Bozama St. John. Yeah.
Yeah.
She's from Uber.
She was from Uber. She worked at Apple for a bit. I think she was last at Endeavor. She's a freaking beast.
She's a genius.
She's a freaking beast.
Yeah.
And so for her to be their new CMO, that is what I'm excited about. Not hiring Bozoma because if you know Bozoma and you've seen her past work,
bruh,
she
was on the Tim Ferriss show. That interview, I listened to that like 2 years ago, bruh. She blew my mind.
She knows her stuff. She knows her stuff. So no one's hiring her because, oh, we just need a Black person to tell us about Black things at Netflix. No, we got the best person for the job. She happens to be Black.
And I like that. You see, I like that. I think they're like when you see these instances, you want, if you're a person, if you're Black or you're a minority, when you're going for something, I would feel bad if I found out that I was there just because I was the Black guy, or I was there just because I filled a diversity role. Like that would make me feel horrible.
It's an insult to my intelligence.
It's an absolute insult to your intelligence. And that's why, like, when I look at all of this, I'm just like, there's a way to go about this to get people in the room so that they can show what they've got. Like the NFL. The NFL, there's something going through because there are a lack of Black head coaches in the NFL. Like it's something crazy. Like you see how many players there are in the NFL, Black players, but you have barely any Black head coaches. And that's actually been something that the people have been talking about, because like, it's like, how do you not have more? And it's just because not a lot of people apparently have been able to get into the room to get the opportunity to have an interview. Right. So they're actually trying to work on actually getting more individuals, more Black individuals that are trying to be coaches, interviews to see if they're good for the role. But that doesn't mean that they're just going to be able to get the job because they're a good Black coach. He's honestly, there's a better coach, but he's white. That coach should get the job because there is money on the line. Right. But there's also a bias too. There are all these processes that have biases, because when you look at the individuals that are looking to hire these guys, who are going to be most of the people that are going to be interviewing them, they're going to be other white guys. And you don't know, in certain places, these white guys might already have biases about what they think about Black men or Black coaches in those situations. So now you don't know, did I not get hired because I wasn't the best? Or did I not get hired because these guys might just not want a Black coach on deck?
Exactly.
Right? There's so much complication there.
That's a really good point. I think that you're right. It can't just be at the rudimentary level of like, we need to get, like you said, Black coaches, but we need to think about our HR practices. Are there Black folks there?
And not just Black folks. Like in these situations, we need to just talk about minorities in general.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
We're talking about minority, but I think today it's like we're talking about Black people.
Yeah.
Right. So so I'm just going off of that. So HR, like, are there human resource directors, or is there Black folks there? Is there Black folks in the board of directors as well, who actually help with the steering of the NFL? You know that there's no Black owners, so it's like there have to be, because folks you can't think of Black people as a monolith. We're not all the same. We don't all have the same background. We don't all think and like just act in the same fashion. We're all individuals. So if we're all individuals, go ahead. You about to say something?
Keep your thought. Keep what you're thinking right now, because there's something I'm going to go on later, but remember what you're saying right now. Go ahead. Go ahead. No, go ahead. I'm not going to say yet.
All right, cool. Yeah. So Black people are not a monolith. So there is a diversity of thought in Black people as well, right? You and I, very similar backgrounds, but we think very differently on certain things, right? And we're brothers. So imagine if you put a whole slew of Black folks in the same room, we're all gonna have something new to add. So people, you have this big smile on your face, like you have something to say. What is it? Because you're having
no. I just know this is the truth.
Yeah,
You're
like
speaking the truth.
You have to realize that. So I think diversity in thought is what takes companies, industries to the next level, because it's not just having a black hire, but we need different perspectives, different lenses in the room in order for us to make valuable decisions that take us in a very positive and progressive direction. And that's what people need to start like shifting towards. It's like, we're not doing it because of black people. If I want to increase my bottom line, if I want to be more innovative, if I want to disrupt, I need to get a diversity of thought in this room, because we're going to have so many different people firing on all different cylinders and we're going to blitz. But if I just have the same people saying the same thing, what is it? JC Penney or Nordstrom, one of the two, just went like bankrupt. And it's like, because they just got the same folks, and I don't know either their business models, but I would assume they got the same folks saying the same thing about department stores for the past 40 years. They weren't able to innovate. And when you have something as tragic as COVID happening, that was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yep. Now, I love what you said there, because I think there's another topic that we can tie into this. And it's a topic that I've talked to you about individually, and it's something that I understand and I know it is real, but I also hate the way I see it being used by individuals, not just in our community, but other communities. Not everybody, of course, but there are many people who I've just seen just used in a disgusting way. And it's the idea of privilege. Now, you saying black people are not a monolith. We are not one person. We are not, you can't look at Morgan Freeman and say, these black people have great voices. Or you can't look at LeBron and say, those athletic, you know what I'm talking about? They jump so high and they run so fast. Those fast, I'm not going to say it. But you don't look at, like, we are all individuals. We all have our individual experience. We all have our individual identities. Now, when I hear a lot of people talk about the idea of privilege, especially now that it's so popular, it's like people use it as a shutdown tactic in conversations. It's like people weaponize the idea of white privilege against white people. The idea of male privilege has been weaponized against me to shut down a conversation. And I'm just like, when I look at that, I'm just like, can't we figure out another way? Because white privilege in the actual context does exist. There are certain things that a white person going through the world or in America will not experience that we as black people will. Okay, we understand that.
Right. There's some advantages that are afforded white people upon birth that they didn't earn or ask for, but are imputed to them, and they carry it with them. And that's what you're saying about white privilege. I just wanted to define it real quick.
Of course. But I also know white individuals who have not grown up in great situations, who have not grown up with great lives by their own definition, who are like, where's my white privilege? Like, they see some things that may be privilege, but other things are just, life is
life just
bad.
All around.
Life is bad for them. They're like, where's my privilege, right? So I think, like, when we talk about this, right, when certain people, and I feel I've seen a lot do this. I feel like the way that you talk about and the way that I talk about white privilege is different from when individuals talk about white privilege and look at those individuals as a monolith of white people. Or when I've had women that I've talked to use male privilege and just use it because it's like, that's just your male privilege. You to shut up because that's your, I'm just like, okay, I already can't have a conversation with you because since I'm a privileged male, you don't know my experience, by the way, as a black man, but just because I'm a man, I can't speak on certain things, right? So I really hate the idea of privilege, or even having, well, I don't hate having conversations about it, but I hate the idea because whenever I look at some of these things, I just wonder, how is it productive? Like when we bring white privilege into the conversation, are we trying to be productive with the way it's being communicated? And in some situations, I do see it communicated to bring about maybe an understanding, maybe help a white person understand, oh, wow, I didn't realize that. I never have gone through something like that. And a lot of you have. I didn't even know that was a thing. I can get that. But I would oddly enough say that a majority of people that are using the term white privilege are just using it as a way to shut down conversations, kind of gotcha to other people, to white people in general. I just feel like it's being more of a negative currently than a positive because it's not understood clearly what it is.
Okay. Before I go into what I was about to say, or response what you're about to say.
Male privilege too. All these, because by the way, I just want to, and this is another reason why
let me
the
ask my
privilege thing
question.
just kind of, I know, just keep it on mind. But the other reason why the privilege thing really annoys me is because, dude, there's a massive scale of privilege here. There's a massive scale of privilege. If you look at privilege as the monolith, right? You could look at just white people or whatever, but then there's Black people, there's Black people that Black people that are trans. Well, Black people have privilege over those individuals. Black, trans, and you have a, not an ailment, but a disability. Like there's lack of privilege there. Like there's privileges are just a massive spectrum that I'm just like, well, there's a point of having empathy, but past having empathy towards individuals that you may have more privileges than, because I would say I have massive privilege over many individuals in the United States and across the world. And there's American privilege, just literally being in the United States and having the opportunity to be here is a massive privilege. Versus being in Nigeria or being in almost any other country is much more of a privilege, right? So it's a frustrating topic, but go ahead.
Yeah, I could see how animated you are around this topic.
Yeah, I'm annoyed with it. Straight up.
Yeah, we're gonna dive into this because I think this is a good point to segue into. And what I was gonna ask before I go into my response is, see, now you made me lose my question.
Okay, we'll cut here when you get it back. Just try to remember, this is just gonna be a long pause.
Yeah. Ooh, there it is. All right, so hearing what you just said and trying to make a clear response, I need to ask you a quick question. And the question is, do you feel like let's say in our lifetimes, in the past 20 years, have you seen or experienced or talked to white people who have acknowledged their privilege prior to this moment?
Prior to this moment?
Prior to this moment.
I don't have conversations, like I just generally,
or maybe
white people that I've known. What do you mean? Because I don't
like, again, it doesn't have to be a forthright question like, hey, do you feel like you're privileged, white person? And they respond yes or no. But it's based on behavior, based on just paradigms that exist in our society that you've noticed. Have you seen that there have been, as a whole, and it's a very broad question, but as a whole, have you seen that white people have expressed like there is an element of white privilege that exists in our society? Like this is the underpinnings of our societal structure, something we have to address, something that we're trying to proactively curtail or change as time goes on. Have you seen that?
Recently, because I've been having more of these conversations, yes, I have. Individuals have acknowledged that, yeah. But these aren't conversations that I would just randomly have. Like these are conversations that I have with Black people.
Okay.
These aren't like when it comes to like race and experiences, these are conversations I've had with Black people that I knew that I didn't talk to white people about these things. But more
Right.
recently, I have been, because it's been the topic because of everything that's been happening. And individuals have acknowledged that aspect. But at the same time, I do notice that the people that I have talked to about this also kind of have a hard time, because they all do have their individual experiences, their individual difficulties, etc.,
Mm-hmm.
that have brought them to be who they are currently. So that's why there's kind of, I feel like with some individuals, almost kind of a disdain towards the idea, just because some people haven't had it easy in their own definition of life, right?
Yeah.
We all know people who have had an easier life than us, Black, white, etc. We all know people who have had a harder life than us. I know Black, white, Asian, etc. We all know that. But it's hard when someone's saying you have these privileges, right? But you're looking at your life and you're like, well, I wish I could have seen that. I can understand that. I do understand that white privilege is real too.
Mm-hmm.
But, everybody again is looking at their own personal experiences navigating through the world. They're not looking at themselves as part of the monolith, which is why what you were saying, I wanted us to kind of think about that, because individuals are not looking at themselves, or most are looking at themselves as an individual with their beliefs and their own life, not as part of a group.
So this is my response. I think that the reason for bringing up privilege and the conversation of privilege is not to compare, because that's the trough that everyone's fallen into.
Mm-hmm.
And that my life is always going to be a comparison of suffering.
Yes.
Whose suffering is more?
Mm-hmm.
You're mentioning like someone who might be Black and trans and disabled. You might be in a whole different realm of comparison than someone who isn't those things, who's white, able-bodied, and straight, right? So that's not what I think the conversation of privilege is supposed to address. What I think it's supposed to do, and I think Bozama actually talked about this. She wasn't talking about privilege, but she was talking about just race relations or just like industry shifts as a whole. And she talks about rehabilitation. You talk about reconciliation. You can't have a conversation that heals and establishes trust until you acknowledge what happened in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason I asked you, like, have white people, addressed their privilege in the past? Of course, you're not going to know, like, yeah, like all these millions of white people, yes, whether they have or not. But up until this point, we can all agree that there hasn't really been a big conversation around privilege. Like equity, and the conversation of equity maybe is a conversation point that's 3 decades old. And all these different industries, mainly in the architecture and planning industry, we try to create frameworks that make sure that we're consistently addressing folks who might not have equal access to certain spaces. So if you think about the American Disability Act, that started, I want to say in the 80s, I might be wrong, maybe it's in the 70s, but that whole framework started as, people who are in a wheelchair can't be parking across the parking lot. They can't be rolling all the way through a parking lot trying to get, that's not safe. So what do? We created handicap parking, like parking stalls that are addressed only for folks who are handicapped. So you get out your car, you're able to get right into the store and get right back out. Something that's safe and something that makes sure that addresses you as a person.
Yeah.
So again, until you address those underpinnings of privilege, you can't really make durable change happen. So when someone like, and I'm not going to speak for women, maybe like you could speak more to that conversation you had, but someone who's like, that's your male privilege. She doesn't know you as a person or what you've gone through, but you have to own, like, yeah, there might be, and we know there are societal constructs that allow for men to silence women or to overpower and domineer women. We all know guys that use power or whatever to silence people around them. Mm-hmm. It's like, you have to be like, hey, I hear you. I hear you, sister. I'm with you. That's not me. But I do acknowledge that being a man might condone or might like imply these things, but that's not me.
It wasn't used in that way, though. That's the thing. It wasn't used in that way.
How was it?
It was not. It was used, and we were having a conversation. I asked a question about why this individual did something in a private message conversation, right? The individual didn't like, I asked them that, right? They asked, well, why are you asking me that? I'm just like, oh, this is why. I'm just curious as to why, right? And then towards the end of the conversation, they're like, well, that's your male privilege. Because I asked. The individual said, no one else asked me about this. Only you did, right? I asked a question and had a conversation, and it was because of my male privilege that I could do that. A woman could have done, a woman, and don't go deeper into this. I don't want to, if this person.
Of course, I'm not gonna, I know.
But a woman could have easily had the same type of conversation. There was nothing that I was saying that was aggressive, that was, it was literally just why was this done this way? I'm just curious, literally, right? There was no privilege there, but that in the way that it was used is the way that I see other people try to weaponize the idea of privilege. I've seen in many situations where someone has says, oh, that's your white privilege, when honestly, it's not. It's used right now a lot in popular media and in social media as a shut up tactic to get the conversation ended, to be more of like a gotcha. The idea of privilege is very, very true, and it's very, very real. But many are not actually using the idea in a fruitful manner to help somebody understand what it may be. It's being used in a perverse manner most of the time. Many of the time, like for example, with what's his name? He just made this YouTube series. The girl from Insecure has hit her boyfriend, her ex-boyfriend. What's his name? Ivana Orji's ex-boyfriend. What's his name?
It starts with Ancho.
Oh yeah. Okay, so he made this series called
That's his ID handle. I don't think that's his name. But go ahead.
He made this YouTube series called Conversations with Awkward Conversations with a Black Man, which I think everybody should, Awkward Conversations with a Black Man. If I got it wrong, I got it wrong. Everybody should listen to it. But he had this episode on what is like white privilege. And he went through it and he explained it. But it was more of an helping individuals understand what they may be like, how the lens that they may be going through the world, how it's very different from minorities and Black individuals, right? And that helps somebody understand that. But what I'm saying here isn't that privilege doesn't exist. It's that a majority of people are weaponizing the idea of privilege against others. And it's not fruitful at all. It actually makes people become very turned off to the whole idea of privilege, and in essence, shut down the idea in any way that it could come up.
Potentially, but I think I'll
not potentially. It's very real. It is very real.
With you. And I'll say this because at the end of the day, whether or not people weaponize it or not, like if someone calls you on your privilege, again, emotional intelligence means that you have the ownership to decide how you're going to react. If you're going to react with, oh, that's privilege, and you're automatically turned off, you weren't open to the conversation to begin with. If someone says,
that's a murky road, Brian.
Let me finish. I'll let you finish. Let me jump into this. I feel that if someone says, look, and you mentioned a young woman who challenged you and said, hey, look, your question is a symptom or it's a byproduct of your male privilege. If someone says that to me, I'll say, all right, look, I received that, and let's break that down. What exactly in this question implies that I'm using or trying to leverage my male privilege? Let's dive into that. Because again, if someone's using it as a way to just shut me up, now we're going to talk about it. We're going to dissect it. And if there's no fruit, then I can say, all right, you're just using this as a way to curb the conversation. But if someone's really trying to say, hey, trying to call me out, I think people are fed up. People are extremely fed up when you're dealing with COVID, you're dealing with all the other things that are in our society right now. No one's trying to deal with like people just skating by. That's where you're seeing all these Karen web pages popping up. You're seeing all of these like what have you, things popping up that are like showcasing these are ill and wrong behaviors, and we're not gonna allow it to just like persist anymore. So if someone says it, it's not because, oh man, they're just trying to attack me. It's like, nah, like we've been letting y'all slide for decades, for eons, just letting y'all do what y'all want to do. And nobody, like you said, was addressing that there is privilege that is existing in this society. Now, if I see you acting crazy and we can go back to Karen Cooper, or that's not her name, Amy Cooper. We're going back to Amy Cooper in Central Park and trying to call the cops on this young brother, or he's not young, but this brother that was in the park. I can see that is an element of privilege. If I call her out on that, am I wrong for doing that? No, I'm gonna call you out right then and there, and I'm gonna describe what exactly is going on. But even if I don't describe it, you should understand, and as a recipient, try to unpackage it yourself and try to do some self-awareness work as well to say, why did this Black man just say that there's some white privilege that's existing in the situation? Let me try to like piece through it. Maybe let me talk to him. Maybe let me do some research. Let me talk to maybe an individual that might have more insight. But I don't think that people should just like not say it because it feels like an attack on others. I feel like people have been attacked for so long. Call it when you see it.
I agree. I also agree that individuals are quite literally using the idea of privilege incorrectly. You can talk about self-awareness in terms of the perception of when it's thrown at you. Be self-aware, understand. Is an idea of my privilege actually playing a role here in terms of my interactions with this other individual? Be self-aware, but also be self-aware to understand when it's actually BS being thrown at you in the idea of privilege, which is going on a lot right now.
Well, use an example.
It is going.
Where have you seen someone calling out privilege where privilege and the idea of privilege didn't really exist?
It happens all the time on social media, bro. Like you go through social media.
Yeah, just give me an example. Like you don't have to describe like it was this video, but this was the interactions happening. Someone said this. I didn't think it that way. Like, what'd you think?
More recently, there was an interview on the Breakfast Club. Shoot. No, it was something that Charlemagne said to somebody, but it actually wasn't. It didn't make sense. I don't have any examples off the top of my head. I just see it a lot. So I can't pull something out of my ass right now, straight up. But the thing is, all I'm saying is that privilege is being weaponized. Like when you're talking about privilege, we're not saying it doesn't exist. But all I'm saying is do not weaponize it when it doesn't actually apply. Many times it's being weaponized when it doesn't apply.
I hear that. I mean, maybe in the future, sure, you could bring up a clear example, but I can see how someone might do that. But again, we need some case study that we could go off of.
Where is a case? What do you mean by case study, bro?
I just said you have to bring an example. I just mentioned an example, so you didn't have one. So I'm just saying that in the future, just bring up one and we'll go off of that.
Give me a second. I'll find an example for you on YouTube right now. We'll pause the show.
All right, for sure. Oh, I got so scared. I was like, yo, did I not push record? I was going to be so sad. I'm about to take a nap after this.
Actually, you know what? No, I mean, I have a primary. This has happened on a person-to-person basis. Okay. You can, when you asked me if I had any examples, I do another podcast called Mark Bell's Power Project, and we have a co-host that's a Latino, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he himself, his lady is a Latina.
Mm-hmm.
And when she posted, she was saying, what are things that I can actually do to help or understand, etc. She got hit with, well, she's not white, by the way, she's Latina, but she's more light skinned. She got hit with like, it's because you're white privilege that you don't understand. And he himself, along with myself, I've seen this too. I've seen this happen. I just can't pull up the receipts. But he himself has seen this type of thing on his social media too, as have I. And all I'm saying is that when we use it, it needs to be fruitful. That's what I'm saying about this. A response saying, oh, that's your white privilege, you should already, whatever. That's, first off, she's not white, she's a Latina woman. But at the end of the day, it's not fruitful to use privilege or to mention privilege in a place where it doesn't lead to helping somebody understand something. We had a conversation with a group of ours when we had like those 10 white guys or 10 black men, where one guy asked, what can we do to educate ourselves, blah, 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 right? And then I think the brother, the PT, he was mentioning, or maybe it was you were mentioning how like, black people are kind of tired because at the end of the day, it's not their responsibility. It's not our responsibility to educate you on these problems, right? We got other things going on.
Right.
But at the same time, where does the fruit happen on a person-to-person basis? When I'm talking to an individual and they ask me a question, I have a chance to shed some light on it. It's not necessarily the best time to be tired, right? It's not. And what I'm getting at here is that instead of, and it's hard to do this because there's, like, I think Pat said this, when you hear something like that, there's almost like a visceral response of annoyance and anger, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's a good time to educate someone on what they can do or the idea of privilege or these things rather than just throw it out there, because many people do just throw it out there. Not many people are actually having intelligent conversations about the idea of privileged. And yes, it is being weaponized. And my point here is saying, do not weaponize the idea of privilege on other individuals. Maybe help them understand where that privilege is coming from rather than throwing it out there. And yes, there should be a responsibility on the individual that potentially does have this privilege to be empathetic and try to understand why are they saying this. But on the person who's throwing it out, there is a responsibility of explaining what that privilege may be, rather than when I see it being used, throwing it out there and letting it happen, letting it do whatever it does. There's no responsibility there. That only breeds disdain towards the idea.
Gotcha. So in that example, you brought up, like you said, someone who was Latina and she posted a good-hearted, she probably had a good-natured post, and she's like, what can I do?
Yeah.
Right? What can I do in response to the protests, Black Lives Matter, systems change, etc.? I do understand that maybe in that context, she's not even white. Like using white privilege, that's your white privilege, that might have been misplaced for someone to, let me finish, for someone to say that in relation to someone who really had a good-natured post. But you did mention something very clear and very very on topic. And I think that education happens, like you said, on the person-to-person level. So if you're not a part of the Black community, and again, I'm just putting myself, if I had seen this and I see this person who's not Black saying, how can I help? Again, like who was that post meant to serve is my first question. Because if you have Black friends, Black relatives, Black whatever, Black school teachers, you would say, hey, I know this is a crazy time going on right now. You would have a person-to-person conversation. And like you said, it doesn't resolve you of your own responsibility to learn. How much due diligence did she do up until that point? Did she just say, oh my gosh, the world's in chaos, let me see what I can do? Or understand that there is a whole history that I need to understand. Obviously, you're not going to know 400 years of Black suffrage today, but like, what have I done to see why these Black people are so mad? Maybe let me try to see what the symptoms are. So I think that is what, in that place, is misplaced. But privilege, again, has an ahistorical view on life, society, and time. It
How about
says,
you
go ahead.
explain an ahistorical view real quick? Explain what an ahistorical view is.
Ahistorical means that we are completely starting from right here. I don't know any of what's happened in the past. What can I do right now? Ahistorical means we're just removing anything that's happened in the past and just leapfrogging it. So if we're having an ahistorical view, that means you don't know about all of these different things that have happened in American society and led to this point, and you want to ask me how you can help or what things should I know? Like, did you do any research? Did you at least try to do some like grappling yourself and say, hey, I actually read this speech that Malcolm X put out in, I don't know, 64, right before he died. And I'm trying to figure out what he was saying when he was talking about poor people in relation to the Nation of Islam. And I'm seeing some parallels with what's happening today. What do you think? And I'm like, oh, shoot. So you've done some research. You're actually asking like for some comprehension. And now you're trying to see like how you can help. Cool. Let's start that conversation. But white people are just walking in a conversation saying, oh, I don't know what to do. Please teach me. That, again, does get to the root of what privilege means, because it means that I need to serve your current state in order to get us to wherever you think that is an idealistic future for all of us.
Understood. So the individual that doesn't know anything and hasn't, let's say this individual actually hasn't put in any groundwork, but is at a place where they're like, shoot, I got to understand. Hopefully they did, but I'm using the context of a person who hasn't at all. Just like that guy who owned those stores. He was, he was from another country. He was in that group too. He mentioned something very, very key that people need to understand. In these types of situations, it sucks that it's your responsibility as a Black person or as a person that this question is being posed to. It sucks that it's partially your responsibility, but there are two roads you can take here. You can take the road of getting angry and saying, I don't have time for that right now. Go figure it out, or blah, blah, blah. Or you can take a road of giving them one piece of thing that they can go do. Hey, you know what? That's a pretty general thing. Go watch 13th on Netflix, and maybe we can talk about it since you're one of my homies. You can actually put something in somebody's mind that can change themselves, that will then they will go and change their family and their children. You can make a pretty big impact on an individual without shunning them away. And that one shun, that one thing, it sucks because I'm just talking about this hypothetical situation, but that one shun by an individual that could have been able to help them might just make them give up on the thing altogether.
I agree with you.
Right? And I get it. There's responsibility on both sides is what I'm saying here, dude. And I get let's take it out of this conversation here, which is educating people, and let's take it back to the conversation about the idea of privilege. There's a responsibility on the individual that has the idea of privilege being put upon them in the conversation to try and understand, well, what is my privilege here? I want to understand that. But there's also a responsibility, like I've been saying this whole time, on the individual using the idea of privilege. You got to know when to use it and when it's actually correct. What I'm saying is it's not being used correct a lot of the time these days, and it's being used to shut down conversations. And I'm saying that that isn't right. I think we can both agree. You might not agree that it's being used a lot. I understand that. But we need to both agree in the idea that it needs to be used correctly. We cannot weaponize that idea because that does not yield fruit. That's what I'm saying here. And I think you could agree with that idea.
I get what you're saying. And yeah, like you said, with the example you mentioned earlier, like that was misplaced. And I think because we're in this time where privilege is a buzzword, just like sustainability was a buzzword or whatever you want to fill in the blank. folks are just using that like willy-nilly, like whenever they feel as though a situation falls under those parameters. So yeah, so I think there's education that happens on both ends. So I think political education is something that a lot of us, myself included, just goes over our heads. We don't really understand um, what's happened in the past and how it affects us today. But like you said, if I'm going to use the word privilege, I need to understand what that concept means. Just like we talk about microaggressions, not everything falls under a microaggression. I think there was a story recently of what is it? Actually, a friend of mine actually said this, and he said that within the school system, like in a school district that is in a state not far from here, a child was expelled because he was going to sharpen his pencil, and he was using that opportunity to work up the courage to talk to a young lady, right? This is in like elementary school, right? So he had a crush on someone, he wanted just to say hi. And he's sharpening his pencil, and he was expelled for sexual harassment because she felt unsafe. And again, we're not reducing the experience on her side, but was the intent to harm? Was on his side this little guy? Was it to harm this young girl? And he was expelled. So it's like,
oh man,
the question then becomes, and I was just trying to frame what microaggressions is. If you just throw it out like, hey, that 8-year-old, that 10-year-old, that whomever is displaying behavior that's similar to microaggressions and making people feel like they got to withdraw or feel scared or feel intimidated, when it's not the case, like you're just harming lives, and you're just, like you said, it's not leading to any fruit within conversations or in discourse or in change around us.
Was it the girl that did the girl claim she was being sexually harassed, or did the teacher put, or you don't know? Like,
I don't know the whole story, bro. I don't know the whole story. I know that was like the kind of what started it, and then what happened, the output was that kid didn't go to school there anymore. So it's just like, you have to be very careful about not canceling people so quickly. And we're in a cancel culture where as soon as someone says something you don't like, boom, I gotta hit him. I gotta hit him with that left, hit him with that right. And then the whole like, and then you then it's blown up on Twitter and IG to the point where now that person has no room to respond. Everybody's against him. He loses all his endorsements, deals, whatever. That person's done. So it's about establishing discourse and seeing like, all right, if you said something and it was offensive, you should have the room to not champion yourself, but to speak on your own behalf. And I think it's important for two ways. Like, one is you're able to kind of like, this is what I was thinking at that time. But then I did this kind of like legwork to understand that this was very offensive to some people, and I apologize. And I think that that vulnerability will make everybody say like, hey, mistakes happen, and you move on. But the other side of that is that folks are just now, they say something offensive, and because the world is crashing on them, they just go to their PR, and PR's like, oh, this is not what they were thinking, and they were not in their right mind, and they're sorry. And it's just, and they still believe it wholeheartedly in their core. They're like, nah, like I meant to say that offensive stuff. But because the world is crashing on them and they don't want to be that other, they're like, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, forgive me. Oh, it's just like, you're just putting people in closets where they're just going to keep those same values and ideas and not actually come to truth and try to like change.
But that's why I'm also very happy that in the United States, we have absolute freedom of speech and there's no ban on hate speech. I think this, first off, this is a topic for another day. I think a topic for another day would be cancel culture. because there's a lot of things about cancel culture, accusations that are not truthful.
Yeah.
There's so many things about cancel culture that, as a man, I'm gonna say this, as a man, I'm so careful about all my interactions that I have with women in general because of cancel culture. Well, that's a conversation for another
You can
day.
get
But
caught up quick.
what you're talking about, about like speech and things people say, I think it is great that we live in a country that doesn't have any type of, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? You can't be put in jail for saying something hateful. You can be put in jail for inciting something hateful, right? So if you're like, I want everybody to go kill George Bush, right? That then if that happens, you can be, you know, put in jail for something like that. But if you're like, I wish George Bush was dead, you ain't gonna like that you can say those types of things. You can also say very hateful. No.
Do we really have freedom of speech?
We do have freedom of speech, but that's like, people can say racist, hateful things. But the thing that's going on right now, and the sad thing, I don't think it's gonna, again, I think this is a topic for another day,
Right.
is that different you know, Twitter, YouTube, those types of places, they're silencing people who have, I guess, very different, some foul views. They're silencing them, right, on a public forum. And I get it, it's a privately owned business, they have that right. But we're in a place where it's like, you know, let these people say these hateful things. Let them say it. Like it is a freedom to say it, right? You can't lay hands on somebody else. You can't tell individuals to harm somebody else. But if you believe hateful, racist things, believe it, say it. I think that that's a good thing, that people can say those things and not be put in jail. Because what happens when you start to try and put a regulations on freedom of speech, it's like, did you know the situation in the UK where this YouTuber had like it wasn't a poodle, but it was a dog. And he made a video where it was a joke in a video where his dog was doing the Hail Hitler, but it was a total joke. This guy isn't a racist or anything. It was a joke. And he got convicted because of it. Somebody reported it, hit news, he got convicted because of it. And those are the murky waters that are happening in the UK and that are currently happening in Canada in terms of speech. I think people should be able to say whatever the heck they want to say, even if it's wrong, even if it's racist, etc. I don't like it, but I do believe they have the right to say it. It's murky water, but
yeah, this is a conversation for another day, because we're gonna have
can't impede freedom, bro.
We have to dive all the way into that. My first and maybe only point for right now is that words matter.
They do.
Words matter. Life and death lies in the power of the tongue. So when folks say things, they mean it, and there are reverberations that come from what you just said. It doesn't just end when I tell you my Nsima X, Y, and Z. It travels, because ideas then form into like thoughts. They bore their way into your mind and they create an idea. Ideas then translate into actions. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not just words. Like, people think, oh, you say whatever you want. They turn into ideas that somebody somewhere in Tennessee is going to use. Like, this is now what I believe. Let me go in, you know, Charleston, South Carolina, start killing people. You feel me? So I'm taking it to the extreme, but it's like, words do matter. And so when you're talking about this cancel culture, and you're talking about letting folks say what they want to say, we have to remind ourselves that, you know, there's a long history in this country of, like you said, freedom of speech is in the Constitution, but you know, Martin Luther King was thrown in jail numbers of times for what he was saying and wasn't breaking any laws. And we can go all the way down the line of all the other people.
Let's also remember that was the 60s when we were trying to fight for our civil rights. I would probably assume that Martin Luther King today, we're aiming for equity here, right? Martin Luther King today would not be thrown in jail for having those ideas and for speaking that. because things weren't equal back then. Things aren't equal now. But at the same time, we do have that freedom of speech as Black people, as white people, as
Kaepernick
whatever.
had freedom of speech.
Kaepernick, people were, he was able to do what he wants to do. He was able to kneel. People didn't like that he kneeled, but he was still able to do it. He wasn't rehired. He wasn't like rehired because I don't think they necessarily.
He had the same playing ability. He was better than a lot of other QBs at that time.
He wasn't better than the QB they brought on after him. He really wasn't. Like, factually,
it doesn't matter about. There's 29 teams in the NFL. He could have played somewhere else. What my point was is that you and I.
But that's not speech though.
What I'm saying is that it was he didn't do anything outside of kneel and talk and
expression. Freedom of expression is a different thing.
But expression is how you express yourself is with words.
It's how you express yourself, but freedom of expression in the United States is different from freedom of speech. Freedom of expression can also be something like writing something on a building. That's not. I'm not defending what they did to Kaepernick. I don't think it was right, but they did have that right to do that, owning the business of the NFL. It sucks.
So we have a podcast that we've been doing for some time now. If you and I both worked for a company, and I have in the past when I was working for different companies, I would tell you I was very particular about the things I would say and the topics we would discuss, because who knows who would listen and be like, "Ooh, I heard Brian say this the other day."
Yeah.
Whether it was right or wrong, if it conflicted with what the company stood for or wanted their employees to represent, that is putting my money at jeopardy. So we have to be clear, like, words do matter and there are repercussions to what you say. You can't just say anything. And even if you're not put in jail, you can lose your job, you can lose your way of life, your quality of life because of what you said.
I agree with that. I'm saying that you shouldn't be able to be put in jail or be prosecuted for saying something. Inciting, yelling fire in a movie theater, you would be put in jail because you are inciting something. That is something lawful. But saying something that's racist, saying something, it shouldn't lead to you going to a courtroom, being prosecuted, and being thrown in jail because you say, "I hate N-words." That's your view. You can have that view. This is the United States. I absolutely don't agree with that view. I probably will dislike you and hate you as a person. But if that's your view and you want to say that, go ahead and say that. Might that lead a young boy in North Carolina to also be like, "I hate N-words"? It might. Would violent video games maybe lead a boy to want to shoot guns and shoot up a school? It might. We're not banning those things though, right? And what I'm saying is that you cannot throw somebody in jail like in other countries, like the UK and in Canada, where they're trying to form laws about speech. That's very muddy water when you want to throw people in jail over things that they say. I don't think that that's right. That's all I'm saying. I know that speech has strength and that it can incite beliefs in others. I totally agree with that. But I totally agree with that individual's right to say it, even though I don't agree with it.
I hear you. We're going to have to dive a lot deeper into speech and cancel culture on the next show. Before we close, is there any last words you might have as it relates to appeasement, as it relates to white guilt, white privilege?
Just the idea of privilege. The whole thing that's very frustrating is we all know that privilege does exist over a massive spectrum. It's very real. And it's good for people to understand where their individual privilege does lie, where they may have experiences that other individuals absolutely won't have, or where they don't have experiences that, Black people have. That's why I thought that the conversation that we had a few weeks ago,
right,
us 10 Black men in a room and those 10 white men in a room, right? When asked the question, "Hey, how many of you guys have ever been pulled over for fitting the description?" Literally all of us Black men raised our hand. None of the white men in that room raised their hand. And one of the guys was like, "What is fitting the description?" Right? that in itself is that's a privilege that you have, that you're probably not ever going to have to experience that multiple times in your life just because you're Black, right? So I hope that individuals that are listening to this, when they now take the idea of privilege into their person-to-person interactions with friends or people that are trying to get an understanding of things, or someone who actually doesn't even understand the idea of privilege, use it as an educational tool. Don't use it as a weapon.
I hear that. Yes. I have to say my last point is there's responsibility on both ends. Try to educate. If you're on the receiving end of the concept of privilege, trying to do your due diligence to unpackage that. Have some composure. I think like we need more composed people that are able to receive information, digest it, analyze it, synthesize it, then respond with something that leads to people getting together, at least to effectuating change, et cetera, et cetera. So try to do your due diligence, acknowledge your privilege by doing the legwork. Try to read some articles, go back, read some books, talk to folks from a previous generation who, and I think we didn't talk too much about that, but folks in a different generation, let's talk about the baby boomers. What do they care about privilege? Like that wasn't even a concept that they talked at length about. They understood that it was there, but it was something that was kind of glossed over. And now we're able to kind of like dive into the weeds of it now. So trying to understand what happened in the past so you can have a brighter tomorrow. And on the next show, we're going to dive more into words. We're going to dive a lot more into cancel culture. And, there's going to be a lot of good stuff that pops out of this. So, yeah. So thank y'all.
Take us out, man.
Yeah. Thank y'all for rocking with us. We just keep ripping and running here on We Don't Know Yet. Tap into our socials. You guys know what to do. And we guys will see you guys very, very soon. Much love, y'all. Peace.